just a minute.
Well, good morning and welcome to the program this morning. Of course, you can say it with me right now. I think, I should just get quiet when I reach that part. And from the time I say good morning and welcome to the program, you, my audience, will simply say it is a great day to be alive. And it is a great day to be alive. Good morning and welcome to the program. I am WendiAnn Ruffin, of course. You know that by now. And I trust that all is well with you and yours. And all is well doesn't mean that everything is going your way, All is well simply means that you are well able to cope with life as life comes. All right. So I am not going to talk much because I have a packed program this morning. Special good morning to those of you from Carriacou and Piki Martinique. Just in case I know that sometimes you're catching us still, yeah. And as things settle down even more, I know that those of you who usually listen to the program and view the program, I know that you'll be catching us again, So welcome to the program. I have a friend this morning. Everybody does turn my friend here, Doctor. Actually, she has my name. I love it when things go. Let's be real. Sometimes you like it when things go your way. So I'll give her a proper title and thing, but then I'll be going with Wendy. Can you imagine I calling my own name today? Dr. Wendy Romain. Good morning.
Good morning.
It is great to have you.
It's great to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for coming, and I hope that it would not be the last time. Most likely.
Okay.
I like to sure. I believe so.
Yes, definitely. I'm sure I'll be back. It's a nice, cozy space here, and I'm feeling it. It's good.
Good. I'm glad. I'm glad when people feeling it.
Yes, it's nice.
It is good. So already, welcome.
Thank you.
And you heard me say the name, so now we're going on first name basis, and we know each other longer than just me trying to find Dr. Romain and bringing her here. So enough for the Dr. Romain, and I know she doesn't mind. She's Wendy. That doesn't mean that you cannot call her Dr. Romain when you meet her. You please do. But I have the privilege of being able to use her first name, and her name is, of course, Wendy. So there you go. We have Wendy and Wendy.
Wendy squared, right?
Yes.
Nice.
So I know for sure you're going to enjoy the program doubly this morning. Wendy is a psychologist. And you might be like, well, Lord have mercy, what it is that we're going to do now? Well, you know that we have, on several occasions actually, we have talked about mental health. It doesn't mean that anything is wrong with you. It is very necessary instead to talk about mental health. And I heard, I knew Wendy quite a while back, but in the capacity as a psychologist, I heard her give, let me not say I heard her. I was part of a session just a few weeks ago.
About a month
ago.
Yeah.
In Carriacou. She was availing her services in Carriacou in the aftermath of burial. And just the way she was able, there were adults, there were children. It was just such a wonderful mix. And people were just so comfortable sharing and whatnot. And I thought, I'm just waiting for she finish. For me to be able to get the opportunity to ask her, would you come on the program? Because I really believe that what she had to offer, what she has to offer, is really practical, and I do believe, I am confident that those of you who are listening and viewing this morning, and especially for those of you who are viewing, I think you are going to enjoy it even more so because of some things that we have in store for you. But whether you are listening or viewing or both, I know for sure that you are going to not just enjoy the program. It's one thing to enjoy it, it's another thing to be able to apply the principles and so forth that we are going to share. So I'm making sure all me talk now, right? All me talk now. So Wendy is going to just tell us a little bit about herself, what she does, and then we will go into the heat of what it is that we've come here to do this morning. So Wendy, just a little bit about you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Wendy. Well, what do I do? As you already introduced, I am a psychologist, a clinical psychologist. And so, of course, I do work a lot with, you say, the entire gamut of the population in terms of adult children. I would say, as you talk about a passion, I do say I have a passion for working with children.
Okay.
When I did my internship a couple of years ago, I remember my supervisor asking me at the time, which population do you prefer working with? And I said at the time, I'm not sure, because at that point I had not worked with that many kids. But during the internship, it was actually an internship for children, Child Guidance Jamaica to be exact. And so of course at the end of it I realized I do have a passion for working with children. So, but however, like I said, I work with children, with teens, with adults, with couples at times.
Right.
But of course, my current job, my main job is actually a lecturer of psychology. Okay. But I do clinical work as well. Right. So that's me, basically.
So you are here, of course, in the capacity of the
clinical part.
Yes.
Exactly.
And I'm so glad again that you could be here, because sometimes when people, I'm thinking that for the most part, when people hear mental health, in a way, as much as you say it and we try to put it every other way, something, I don't know if it is a cultural thing in Grenada, but when we hear mental health, I find that people begin to think somebody mad or something is wrong with someone. So even before we go, I know we have some goodies on the side there, so those of you who are looking at the goodies, I'm making sure I draw it to your attention so that you will not get too distracted by, we will be talking about the things that we have on the table. But going back, when we're talking mental health, generally, I know everybody, have their different slant on it and so forth. When we're talking mental health, and especially as so many things are happening, life is happening to people, how would you define it? And especially the fact that you're dealing with children, what is your simplest definition you're going to use for that? For
mental health? Well, let me just reframe it to say we have a physical, we have a spiritual, we have a psychological, we have a mental, and a lot of times we just, when we think of health, we think of just the physical part. But we do have a mind, we do have a brain, and of course there are things that happen in our everyday life. Like you say, it's just a taboo. We think mental health and think somebody's crazy, somebody's mad. But there are a number of things that could happen in an average day that could affect your psyche, how you think, and how you feel as a result of an experience you have. And that could affect, I could say, your mind, right? So in simple terms, mental health is basically ensuring that you have the resources that is provided in many different, as we would say, we will explore some of them today, that ensure that you are psychologically in tune and able to function on an average and a daily basis well, being able to think clearly, right, and being able to function in your normal day activities. Just in a physical way, you want to ensure that your mind and your body both of them are working and in tune and enable you to function, because I think that's a lot of times the part that's important, because we may have issues, whether it's death, whether it's any kind of loss, when it becomes pathological or psychological, is that when you cannot function, when you cannot function on a daily basis. You can't do your job, you can't wake up, you don't want to eat, you don't want to sleep.
So once you are affected in that kind of way,
any of us can be affected in that way. So then that's the reason. We don't want it to get to that point where it becomes pathological. We want to check it. Right? Before it gets to that point. So that's why it's important. Mental health is important. And as you say, a lot is happening, even currently, and whether it's within Grenada or in Carriacou, as we reference, and the outside world that impacts us, that affects our ability to be able to think clearly and function. And that's what we want to ensure that we can do.
I would love to engage individuals who have experience, because all of us, of course, we have our mental health to take care of, but there are individuals who would have gone through whatever, a lot of the whatevers, and have not been able to, really what we will call, they're unable to cope, or may not have coped well. You tend, again, as I said, people when we, because people are thinking a lot of the times, oh, something is wrong from the place of their mind. When someone now comes to share maybe their experience, you understand, and I think that we as a culture and as a society, we have to be so careful about the way we treat with people when they're going through whatever they're going through. Because I've heard, and especially as you mentioned children, you would hear us as many adults will say things like, oh, why you have to study? I've heard that so many times, and as much as I know we have other things to talk about, but because we reference children, I would like us to just spend just a little time, you know what I mean, on children, because as I say, you hear that. Children come in, and even as a teacher, I mean, I've been a teacher by profession for years, and a child will be really uncomfortable. Things are happening. You can see something is really off with the child and whatever. And then if the child begins to express him or herself and say, oh, you know, well, whatever, I'm worried. What you have to worry about? You know, that kind of. So if we can speak at least a little bit to that before we go into, I know that we discuss having to look at trauma and so forth, because these are the things that begin to affect our mental health.
Right. Okay. Children are at a developmental stage different to adults. And people often assume because you're a child that you're a little person who is not concerned or not affected by what is going on around them. And little do persons realize that children are very observant. In fact, from a child, a baby is born, one of the things they do when they're not, first thing they do when they're not, most important thing that they do when they're not sleeping is that they look around, they observe, they pick up. And so there are a lot of things that's going on, that, especially when kids are very young, that they may not be able to verbalize and tell you this affected them. Right. It's kind of like even just a simple thing as when you pierce a baby's ear, and you think, oh, it's okay to pierce the ears because they didn't feel. What makes you think the child did not feel? They felt it, they just cannot express. And so children are forever taken, they're like sponges, they're picking up everything that's going on. They may not be able to verbalize. And then the other thing about children, we have to remember from our culture, we come in from a culture where it has been said children should be seen and not heard. Right? So it's like you don't say or you don't express. You don't want, sometimes it's seen as disrespect when if a child is trying to verbalize, well, I feel that or I think that or this affected me, but it's affecting them. And as we're linking it to trauma, one of the things that is suggested with children, and that's why the play therapy and all of that is very important, and it's been manifested when counselors and therapists are working with children. A child might be what we call pre-verbal, right? They're not able at that stage, let's say before age 3, something happened. Let's say there's a situation where a husband is abusive to his wife, or vice versa. That an incident happened and that child observed that. The child may not be able to verbalize to anybody what happened, or maybe even maybe a little scared, because a child in that situation would be scared of what they observed. But it doesn't mean that it didn't affect them, and it's now becoming part of what we call a trauma. And there's something called a trauma wall, where when we have certain really exposed to devastating experiences, traumatic experiences, stressful experiences like those, where a child would place that and seem to be fine, but it's only later on the child, in a play therapy situation, for example, the child will depict it. And it's only then the person who's working the child realizes, hey, wait, this is suggesting that. But we didn't realize that child was affected, but they were. So that's why we have to take children seriously, because they may observe things, they may choose to, maybe afraid to. Sometimes also they are threatened, depending on the situation. They are threatened that if they say, but it doesn't mean because they're not verbalizing it, or they may even not to have any visible signs of trauma or stress, that it's not inside.
Or they may be asked, I'm sure, whether or not anything is quote unquote wrong, because I think we tend to do that a lot. Is anything wrong with you? And of course, whether it's fair or whatever other reason, the child would say no. So you just take that no as in the child is okay.
The child is fine because the child said they're fine, but it doesn't mean that they are. But sometimes it comes, sometimes they internalize it and they seem to be fine, and sometimes they act it out. They may externalize it and they may be angry, they may act out, they may be emotional, moody, you know. They're for those kind of kids, because everybody is different, every child is different, depending on how they were reared or their personality, they may or may not externalize it, so that you know. And that's why we said with children, it's not just the talk therapy, which is, you know, probably more appropriate for adults, and you can get more out of an adult. Children also, one of the things with children is that they don't necessarily have all the labels of the emotional words to tell you, I feel angry or I feel sad, or right? They may be able to tell you, but you have to be, as the adult, have to be observant. And even if they say no, you may still find, you know, I think, let me go a little further. Maybe I think I need to get this child to see someone, to see a counselor, a therapist, you know.
And even that again is maybe, and there is this little taboo still there. Because if the child has to go, quote unquote, to counseling, now there's something wrong.
Exactly.
You know, instead of just seeing it as, well, you need to know yourself as the adult in the picture here, what is going on with this child. So I need to at least know what's going on. If the child is not going to open up to me, at least he or she might open up to someone else.
And then a lot of times it's where the kids spend majority of their time, which is where the school. So a lot of times teachers, you've been a teacher, a lot of times teachers become the therapist, or they may not be necessarily the therapist, but they may observe a behavior. They may observe the child is not performing as they should, they're not paying attention. There are different things, because parents are at work. When the child comes home, they just give them supper, they bathe them, they go to bed. But the teacher is with the child for a great majority of the time of the day. So they are oftentimes in a better position to say, I know that child, and that child is not, you know, normally like that. Something is wrong. And one of the things which we will talk about in a while, and I'll show you and make you handle it, is the issue of the sand tree. As I was saying to you, with the children who maybe, whether they're pre-verbal or they're verbal, one of the things I always say that I think every school, every preschool in particular, or primary school should have in a corner is a sand tree. It's just a box with sand and some toys. Because oftentimes the suggestion is a child may not necessarily, a lot of times they may not need your intervention. They can work out their trauma themselves in the corner. You know, like you say, you have the corner where we send them for discipline. The timeout corner. But this is not a timeout corner. This could be called a therapy corner. You may not want to label it therapy, but you know it's therapy. The child just go there with whatever toys appropriate toys that are put there. The child can work out their stuff, and then you see them, you know, manifesting better. They don't seem to be as anxious or depressed. They seem to work it out in the sun, right?
And I believe, because sometimes we forget that a child is a person.
A person.
You know, we just see a child as though that is a totally different, a totally different being, but is a person with all that comes with the person, the individual, and all the things that we experience. And I believe that right there. And sometimes, to me, I find what is kind of amazing is that generation go, generation come. You would think that as individuals who are exposed to more knowledge, maybe, and whatnot, that we may be or should have been a little more sensitive. I talk about as a general population, but it would seem that maybe culture is stronger than just I don't know.
I believe, and I think a lot of times the strongest element of the culture. Oftentimes, so even if you know at the back of your head, I probably shouldn't speak to my child like that, or shouldn't talk to them, I shouldn't smack them in front of people and embarrass them, or whatever it is that parents sometimes do that is probably not appropriate, is what are other people's thinking? You know, did people who are observing think that I handled it in the right way? So a lot of times it's more about others in a society and what they think, and they are informing our decisions and how they interact, rather than say, it's okay, I'll deal with you when I get home. We will talk about it when I get home. They will come smack the child, and it's like, no, you don't do that to the child in public.
Well, as a matter of fact, I mean, and even as you use that illustration, you've literally, you would hear others around the situation saying things like, and let the child get away with it, that kind of thing. Exactly. And that fuels the behavior or the response from the parent that ordinarily the person may really and truly not have even, dealt with it that way. But who knows, I'm hoping, because it seems like we've gone into a whole wonderful kettle of fish. Yes. So it was a good fish. It's a good kettle. I think that maybe we should go into parenting, especially from that place. How does our psyche affect the way we parent? Right. I think that in itself is a whole...
That's a whole new another program. That's a whole other
I think it would be a wonderful one and a needful one.
Yes.
But no, definitely, because maybe it's not an area where we look. Because there is this one, and before we just move on, but there is something I think that as a culture, we do it a lot. When a child... particularly, but maybe we see it other ways too, but especially a child, when the child nearly do something, and the amount of punishment the child gets for nearly, especially if the child nearly get bongs. I don't know if you've read that one is a classic. I mean, I want to make it humorous, but it almost is. It's not supposed to be funny, but it's like, you look at how you nearly get bongs, and and it's like, but thank God, he nearly get bongs and didn't get bongs. And the poor child now is in more pain for nearly, and you'd swear that maybe the child actually, or something is broken. I think that one is a classic. I believe that I know for sure, I grew up more nervous about breaking things, because if a cup is broken, oh Lord, well,
all hell broke loose.
Yeah, literally. Breaking the cup. And nothing, instead of, are you okay?
Right.
It is, look, you break the cup and all that goes around it. So I really believe that this is
so that example you use is a good one, because it speaks to double trauma, because the child, the parent doesn't realize the child would have their own traumatic experience and response.
Yes.
Not just then, but thereafter, the child may have flashbacks to the fact that a car nearly hit me.
Yes.
And the child could end up in therapy for having, that's a traumatic event
in itself.
So then you add the additional trauma on top of it, that I was also punished for. So that's a very good example. So we have to, these are things that we have to step back and think about. How do we respond?
Yes.
And like you say, are we responding? It's less about the child and more about partly how we were raised, and partly about how we're feeling in the moment.
Yeah.
Like you say, look what you nearly make me.
Yeah,
you nearly make
like
me.
That too. Yeah, you nearly make me. Yeah, that's another classic.
Yeah.
You nearly make me. Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I think I'm bringing you down.
That's fine. Okay.
Anyhow, but I'm not surprised that we are going there. But I really do believe, especially for our culture, it is needful for us to go, at least there. But we will definitely get into it in much more detail. That I can guarantee. I can't say when, but we will. Yeah. All right. So we've mentioned a few terms so far. We've mentioned trauma for sure. You mentioned the trauma war. So if we could just look at some of the phrases and the labels that come as it relates to mental health. When we think in mental health, that immediately comes to mind, and the things that really affect people. What are some of those that we can talk about?
Okay, so the topic we had at hand is trauma, grief, and loss, and they're all interrelated, right? And so we use some of these terms. They all interrelated, like I said. But just think what exactly we're referring to. So it's always good, like you say, to outline or to delineate the key definitions or terms that we're talking about. And it's a good transition, because we ended up talking about trauma, the child being hit, right? But there could be a traumatic event to anything, right? I remember seeing a lady a couple of years ago who had a traumatic response of being stuck in an elevator for a couple of hours, and she had to have therapy for years because of that.
Wow.
No. So it's kind of like a noun and a verb. There's an event and there's a response. So there's a thing that happened, and then there's the physiological, psychological response to that event. Now, the thing also we have to remember, and sometimes that's why we have to also step back, and even with children, and be aware of the fact that not necessarily everything what you might be considered to be traumatic, I may not consider to be traumatic. So in a sense, it's kind of like a perception thing, because individuals have situations that they think is traumatic, and they have a stress response, their body have a stress response to it. And it's like, really, it's like, I don't find that to be stressful. But then there's the event part, which we know for sure happened. For example, we talk about burial that just passed in Karakou. Nobody can deny the fact, unless maybe you were sleeping and did not experience it. And I've heard people who've been through Ivan who said they slept through Ivan and they don't know what you're talking about. They didn't see anything, right? But for the majority of the persons, the event happened. It was devastating. A lot of people lost their homes. We cannot deny that fact. And we would conclude, because of the severity of it, because that's one of the criteria for what trauma is defined as traumatic, is the fact that it was severe. That it was severe, that you were there. We know for sure it was severe. We know that people were very present. We heard some of even when we were in Karakou, we heard some of the people, how they described the situations. We wonder, how did they survive in a little bathroom with you understand? So we conclude that we would expect that there should be a trauma response. And so what is a trauma response? Anything that happened that's devastating like that, we have what we call the flight, right? Thereafter, the flight, someone may choose to flee, they may freeze, right? They may fight, they may become aggressive. In Karakou, one of the things that was said is that afterwards some Grenadians were saying things like, Karakoonians seem to be lazy, they're just sitting down and they're doing nothing.
Not understanding.
That's a trauma response. The freeze, a trauma response. And so that is the body's way, that is the brain's way of protecting the sympathetic nervous system. Right, is the one that's involved in when you're in the moment, right? When you're trying to protect yourself. But thereafter, after the event is past, you find that that is part of the shock. That person's, it's like kind of like you don't know what to do. But but in a way, the body needs that, the brain needs that, because you need to cope in the moment. Can you imagine if your heart was continuously racing, which is what happens in a sympathetic nervous system? People die actually of panic attacks where their heart is continuously racing. So the body is doing that to protect and preserve itself. In a moment, people would be, for a while, they would be shocked. The thing is, they need to get to that stage where they move on from that, and then they could start functioning.
But would you, just for way of clarity, you use the burial situation as the example? As one of the examples. But that particular thing that you just explained, that the literal way in which, when you said people kind of just seem to do nothing, would that be similar to when persons, let's say they have a death maybe, especially if it's like one of those, what is the word I'm looking for? It's an immediate death. It's a sudden
death. A tragic. Yeah.
And then they just, or maybe they move about and they're functioning. What looks like it seems as though nothing happened. And they just
robotic.
It's
the same thing, because it doesn't really matter what the event is. So for example, Kubler-Ross, well, of course it's been updated and upgraded to in contemporary times. Persons have used different ways of defining it, but Kubler-Ross talks about one of the phases. The first phase is anger, denial. Sorry, the first one is denial. Right? You're denying that it happened. Then you get angry. But one of the contemporary models has it as shock and denial, not just denial, but shock and denial. So in that phase, you are shocked, but at the same time,
you can't believe it.
You can't believe it, but you are. It's kind of like you're robotic. You're just going through the motions. It's after a while when things settle down and you begin to process what really happened. People start feeling the anger coming on, and then the depression afterwards would come on. Right. But in the moment, you would have that response to anything. It's kind of like also, I found after COVID, that was a typical thing that was happening, because people were dying. Remember after COVID, we had a lot of people were dying, and almost every day you're hearing somebody died. Somebody died, people that you know. And I remember somebody close to me, I was saying that to them, and I did not even see a response. You know, like normally you see a shock response? The person just almost did not respond. And it's like the body's way of coping, because it's too much. It becomes overwhelming. So then you become numb, like you're not feeling. It's somebody
afraid to feel in some cases,
but it's the body takes over.
Still,
but somebody looking on and not understanding what happened might think, oh, this person is cold. I just told you such and such person died down the road. But don't forget, I had about 5 persons dying in the last, almost every day I had somebody. So you become kind of like desensitized in the moment. It's not that you don't care, that is how the body's way of helping you to cope.
And I believe that, you see, you're explaining it like that. Again, I believe it will have to be where it's a total re-education that will have to take place in the minds of individuals too, because I really don't believe that individuals understand what goes on psychologically anyhow as it relates to things in life. Even a person giving birth to someone, as much as they enjoy, oh yes, it's beautiful little baby, but then when you reach the issues like postpartum depression and so forth, that's a whole different, oh well, why you don't nurse the baby? The baby is such a cute baby. Come on and nurse the child and stop that. You know what I mean? And I really do believe that it is those different situations, those kinds of traumatic experiences, maybe because we I'm not saying that nothing is done, I mean, because I don't want to be that kind of general and callous, but I do know as a culture maybe a lot has not been done generally now. It has not been our thing where, you know, as I said, somebody goes into hospital. You went into hospital fully pregnant with your bag, expecting to come home with a little bundle crying, and you have to come back home with the bag, but no bundle. You know, and I believe that those are things I'm hoping that we might be able, I know it's not today, but if we can really deal with, because I don't know, I might be wrong, you are in the field, but I'm thinking that for many people, when they go back home, when many of those things, they really don't know how to cope. The issue is, the situation is there, but how do I really address these things and don't feel like I'm going crazy?
But don't forget, we were talking about one of the topics is loss, right? So you have the trauma, you have the grief response, which is the emotions you feel inside, but you have a loss. And the loss is kind of like a two-way thing. The loss that you have not having that baby, and if we relate it also to what we can relate it to Karakou and anything that a child lost is lost. So you're going home, as you say, without a baby, and that's loss. You go through. You have to, and it says that grief is a natural response to loss. It's described as a natural response. You expect it to. In fact, you have to. You have to be able to, in the end, be able to be psychologically adjusted and be able to function normally. You must grieve. So that's why we have to allow people to cry, and allow children to cry, allow persons to mourn. That's part of it too. Mourn is the things that we do. Like we put on a black dress. Different cultures have different ways of mourning. Some people have 9 days, some people have 3 days. People can do different things, but that is their way of adjusting and coping with what has happened. We have to allow that process. Sometimes it becomes complicated, and they need further therapeutic or psychological intervention. But it's something that must happen. So you are right. Whether individuals like that are given enough psychological help and support, I don't want to say categorically no.
No, at all.
But we certainly don't talk about it enough, because I can't say I know what happens in the hospital. I suspect there might be a follow-up. They probably have social workers that follow them up.
And that is the thing. Because I'm sure, I mean, as much as we do know that there are areas in our entire system that needs, you know, but we do know that something will be done. I believe it's the length of time. Because we cannot put a time frame and say to somebody, well, by now you should have.
Exactly.
I think that is what, again, maybe we do as human beings, not just as our society, but maybe as just as people. Well, it's all these years, it's all these months. Come on, man, catch up yourself.
Right.
We say these things.
We put a timer on them,
Yeah.
and everybody's different. Everybody's situation is different. The type. It also depends on the type of loss, whether it's more tragic. There's some losses that are more tragic than others, and for that person, how they perceive it. You might think it's not, but to them, it's more tragic. So that's why it's an individual. You have to have that, session, that counseling session with that person to find out, how you're feeling and how did you, what's your experience and interpretation of this event? How is it affecting you? And then, what can we do? And as you say, the follow-up. The follow-up.
There was a very interesting
one day.
situation in Karakou. Of course, obviously there's no need for names and so, but it was, to me, I was kind of in the look-on seat in my time of going up there after burial. And it is an individual who got, their blood pressure went up and was hospitalized. Okay. But the thing is, what immediately stood out to me is that everyone around the situation was a little bit in shock. It's like, but this person hasn't lost anything.
Right.
You know what I mean? They didn't lose, and I'm raising this one because I really would like to hear your take on that.
Sure.
They did not lose their home. They didn't have a home to lose because they were renting, and where they were renting, that place is totally fine. They have their job, the place is back up, and everything from the outside, what people will say, well, you're okay. The person, pressure just kept going up, going up. And everybody, when I say everybody, the folks around is like, but what could possibly be going? And then one person in the midst of it said, but she like to worry about other people.
Right.
And that stood out to me. Of course, it wasn't my situation to voice anything too. But it really, as I said, stood out because I'm like, somebody else looking on would be like, why she hadn't, again, our culture again, lady, you have nothing to worry about. But she literally and honestly got sick. She is not like she just went just to test your pressure, had to be hospitalized for about 2 or so days to be kept under observation. But nothing on the outside seemed. So how do we work on that one?
Well, before we work on it, it's always good to first of all have an understanding of what's going on there.
Yes.
So you said that she worries. The person said that
is what the person said
worries
when they started to try to analyze what's going on with her.
But even for persons who don't worry about other things, there's something called vicarious experiences or vicarious interactions or observations and effects on individuals. So you could have vicarious loss. It's not your loss, but you observed. Sometimes you hear stories of children who were not, or persons who were not even there, but they heard about it and it affects them psychologically.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember when we were doing the persons were telling their story in Karakou. And to me, what stood out to me, a number of persons who actually became emotional it was not by themselves. Right. I don't know if you remember that. They were emotional about
I remember there was a gentleman in particular. He didn't experience any direct loss, but when he started, he literally broke and he's like, I remember that one in particular.
So he was, there were 3 of them in my memory who, when they eventually were crying, one of them, of course, was somebody who died, but others, it was, yes, I lost my roof, but this other person is so much worse than me. And they were so emotional, and some of them were crying. So we have that vicarious response, and sometimes it affects us psychologically. For example, I remember there was a child I was seeing when I was doing my internship, and there was a period of time in Jamaica where there was a spate of kidnappings. A lot of children were being kidnapped. Right. And I saw this child who was a very bright child. He was 6. He was the top of the class. And he wasn't sleeping. He wasn't functioning in class anymore. He was crying all day. He was crying all night. And it wasn't that he was kidnapped. some of his friends
Right.
in his school, he was also afraid that he would be kidnapped, right? And it was affecting him that, of course, through some of the stuff we did. As simple as art therapy, he was fine after that. So what I'm saying is, for that individual, if it is affected him to that point, that person needs to sit with someone and work that through, because you can't tell the person because it's not your experience, or because you should not feel that way.
And again, it come down, that's why I said, really and truly, I really believe that re-education of our population has a lot to do with it, because that's the kind of, even if somebody doesn't say it, but for many, I know I would be out of place to say everybody, but for the larger number of us, we would say things like, well, it's not your problem, or things like that, and making the person feel now even worse for even feeling the way they feel. So that's another set of situation again. But oh my goodness, Wendy, I brought you down again.
That's okay. No, but we still, we might be tearing off a little bit, but we're still on track. We're talking about trauma, we're talking about loss, we spoke of grief, we spoke of mourning, so we're on track. We're good.
We're on track. All right, we're so much on track that if I tell you that we are more than halfway into the program, you'll be amazed.
Okay.
So let us take a quick break,
Sure.
and we are going to be right back.
Excellent.
From Dover, we went up to Top Hill to see the Church of St. Margaret Mary Alcock. And this is how we found it, on the ground. The bishop here is looking at the church. The roof was healed off and thrown over almost onto the home next door to the church. So there are 6 churches on the island of Carriacou. We were able to visit 5 of them. We didn't get to see, time did not allow us to visit the Church of St. Lawrence in Harvey Vale. And we were unable to make the crossing to Petit Martinique because the weather was not good and the small jetty at Petit Martinique had been damaged, and we would not have been able to go ashore on the big jetty because it was much too high for the boat, for Mr. Clinton Bailey's boat. So this is how we live. This is what we see. This was our experience on the island of Carriacou on the Friday, the 12th of July, 2024. If you would like to contribute towards the reconstruction of homes and churches on the islands of Petit Martinique and Carriacou, please send your contribution in one of the following. May God abundantly bless you.
You are my strength, strength like no other, strength like no other, reaches to me.
Well, thank you very much for staying with us. And for those of you who may have just joined the program, well, you missed a lot, but the good thing is this: you could get it on Facebook, you could get it on YouTube, and you could check it out. So at least you could get what you missed. This morning I am chatting with Wendy, who is a psychologist. Before the break, we were looking at what is loss, what is trauma, what is grief. We looked at that, but of course amid a lot of discussion. So as I said, if you want to hear what we were speaking about, then you'll have to go back. But now that we have come back, she has some goodies here. Wendy has some goodies, and it's wanting to talk, but for me, I'm thinking it's really, really practical for us to be able to use some strategies, and she does have some strategies that she will share with us, things that you can do, I'm sure, with your children, for yourself, and how you can help somebody else, because we don't always need a psychologist like her to come at home, but there are some simple things that we can do to be able to deal with certain things that we might be going through. All right, so Wendy, go right ahead.
Okay, so before we get into looking at the actual items, some of the things that we work with both with adults and kids in terms of therapeutic interventions and so it's just 2 words that I'd like to talk about a little bit. We've mentioned it already: coping.
Right.
So of course, Just backtracking what we've spoken about, you know, the event, whether it's a traumatic event, whether it's a loss, we said that there are many loss of different types. A child could have lost, for example, losing a tooth, to having parents divorced or parents unemployed. The things that you would not necessarily think of as loss could be a loss for a person or a child, right? So, but of course, the goal in any therapeutic situation is to get the person to that point where they can cope, right? And where they, for example, in therapy, for example, one of the goals is that the person is not dependent on you. You may do 1 or 2 or 3 sessions with them. They can get to a point where they have tools that they can work with to help themselves. Or if they're in a situation where they're feeling a certain way, they're feeling anxious, or they're feeling overwhelmed, or whatever it is that the feeling that they may feel, they may think, oh yes, well, Dr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so shared this with me or told me I could do these things, and so let me try it now. Because as you say, we are not going to be there. And in fact, we don't want to be. We want them to be dependent on us. We want them to become independent of us and to become self-reliant at a certain point, depending on what it is. Right. So, what is coping? Coping is one of the things. Coping is described as thoughts and behaviors used to manage internal and external stressful situations. So, because we have the thoughts, the internal, right? You don't know what I'm thinking. I could be stressed out and worried about something. You don't know what it is, but I am feeling overwhelmed inside. Yes. But I have tools that I know. We'll talk about some of those in a minute. What I can do, right? And then the other one is hope. We talked about hope, for example, before in Karaku, when we talked about burial and the fact that, and when I think of burial, I'm thinking of both adults and children, because I remember I was saying to you, I think sometimes children can be lost. We focus on adults and the house building and how they feel. We focus, what about the children? How are they coping? You know, there's been a lot of displacement and all of that. How are they coping, right? And one of the things we had done when I did that session was, what is your hope? What does your picture look like? Hope is described as a feeling and an expectation and a desire for certain things to happen. And I remember when we did that session, some people drew houses. It may not be a house. It may be money. It could be anything that when you think about it, what is the first thing that you think of that would be a hope picture? So this is one of the things that I had worked with, you know, if I was working with someone or an adult or child, I may say to them, so draw for me what your hope picture would be. You know, that is one way. And the important things about the drawing, we talk about art therapy, is one of the things, remember I said, I can't remember if I did say it, but I intended to, is that trauma resides in the muscles. Trauma is not only, it could be in the heart muscle too. It's not necessarily, especially for children in the head. Remember we talked about not being preverbal. It relies in the muscles as well. So that's why you want to put it somewhere. One of the comments was made by a psychologist is that with loss and grief, you need to harness it and you need to put it somewhere. You need to externalize it somewhere. You need to convert it. And so converting it and externalizing it is a good place to put it. Out of the head if it's there, out of the muscle, in the heart, wherever it is, and place it here. That's one way of helping to heal, right? So that's the issue of hope. So we don't have time today, but if I was working with you, I would say to you, tell me what your hope picture is like. It'd be interesting to see. All right. So hope is described as a motivational mindset based on successful goal planning. We can probably say this could be goal planning if you're working with someone and you're telling them what are some of the things that, let's see what will work and what we'll do to help you, right? It becomes a plan. It's like in therapy we give homework, you know, every session, this is what I want you to do, right? Effective use of goal-directed energy, right? And creating pathways towards achieving those goals. So this is all part of what we would do if we were working with a child or with an adult, right? So here I have some of the things, and I call this the therapeutic corner. Therapeutic corner. In terms of, so before I get into talking about the things, the other thing I want to say is that one of the things that is suggested as to why we have anxiety a lot of times about whatever it is that we overthink. we think too much, and sometimes that's why you need to move away from too much of the talk therapy, which involves thinking, and you need to do.
Just right.
Because when you're thinking, overthinking, that makes you anxious. But when you engage in what is described as sensory activities, and we'll talk about some of these sensory activities, you realize that you can't think. And maybe you can try that with me. If we deep breathing, right? You can probably try the deep breathing. You tell me after you do the deep breathing, were you thinking about anything at the time? Right? We'll try that in a minute. But one of the things that you can try, I intended to bring it, I printed it, and then I forgot it. So one of the things that we work with in terms of helping, and you can do that because I did mine, it's called finger breathing. I did finger breathing.
Okay.
So what you can do, you put your hand, you draw your finger, like draw your hand like that.
Right.
I actually had some pretty ones, but I forgot it on
So
my
just draw it like how children would draw.
Right, exactly. So this is, let's say, for example, a therapist or individual, a teacher, whoever, or parent who's working with some kids, and you want an activity to do to help kids to relax. You can say, okay, we just draw our hands. Everybody get a piece of paper, we draw our hands. We draw the hand, okay? And so if we put up the hand is here, right? But if we put it up to demonstrate to persons who are looking on, what we want to do, you're breathing in and then you're breathing out. So we're going to count to 3. And so while you're doing it, you can also tell me while you were doing it whether you were thinking of anything.
Okay.
Or the next one. So we breathe in, 1, 2, 3. Breathe out, 1, 2, 3, in. 1, 2, 3, out. In, out, in. 1, 2, 3, out. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, out. And so the idea is that for every time you go up on the digit, you breathe in, you count to 3, and you breathe out, you count to 3, right? And so by time, the good thing about the finger breathing is to help you to think that you need to do it a number of times, because normally when you do the 1, 2, 3s without the finger, it says do it as many times as possible until you feel calm.
Right.
Okay? So we can just do
So
it.
it's not just count to 10. You know, not you used to hear before.
Right.
Count to 10, breathe, count to 10, and then you get people saying, listen to me. This breathing thing, not
No, okay. Yes.
I've heard.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
but well, in terms of the what I think I was thinking about the instructions so much that, that I wasn't thinking about doing anything
The
else
activity.
except except
So let's
just do it.
forget
Yeah.
about this, and you just breathe. So you breathe in, 1, 2, 3. Out, 1, 2, 3. In, 1, 2, 3. Out, 1, 2, 3. You can just continue doing it a couple times. Okay.
Well, for me, it's bring the since you did it the first time, not with the finger though, but when you said I don't need to use the finger, immediately I was in my relax corner home.
Excellent.
Which is where I either play Candy Crush or I crochet.
Excellent.
So, no, for real, as soon as I got into the deep breath, I just literally felt myself going back into my relaxed state.
Right.
Because I literally know my relaxed state. I don't know if there's a term for that, but that's my space, you know. So that deep breath just did that. It was like, that was just what I felt.
Exactly. Let me just take this back. So, that you can keep. so I'm glad you said that, because that was the next thing I was going to suggest, and that we do is to get you to relocate. And this is part of what is called mindfulness. It's just getting you in touch. It's sensory experiences to get you in touch. So mindfulness is a form of meditation. We're not going into the transcendental meditation. No, it's just simple meditation. It's just for calm, right? You focus intensely and you become intensely aware of what you're sensing and feeling.
Right.
And you talked about you going
immediately.
Right. And another one that we do is to just ask person to close your eyes, go to wherever that relaxed corner is that you have at home, you know, or some people go to the beach and pay attention to your breaths as you breathe in and out. Pay attention to your chest as it moves up and down. And in that way you're relaxing. But what you would also notice is if afterwards somebody asks you what you were thinking, you were not thinking about anything.
True. Yeah, because you're literally not thinking about the things or whatever, because
that
he wasn't even thinking
you.
about the program.
Exactly.
And we were literally in the program, but I wasn't thinking about anything else except, well, I wasn't thinking completely
Right.
Okay.
And that is what you
Interesting.
want adults or children. I've worked with kids where I say, even if you feel stressed during the middle of class and, you know, you just want to take a moment, you can do that. Right? You can. You don't want to do the finger thing in class.
No,
you don't want people to see it. But you can you can breathe in and out. You could relocate your mind for a minute. And then the other one that we call PMR, which is progressive muscle relax. You can just tense and relax your muscles. You can do it in a situation where persons are not observing. You tense your butt, you relax. You tense your feet, you relax. You screw up your face, relax. All these are tensing and relaxing. This helps you to relax. Because that's what we want to give persons who are feeling anxious, overwhelmed at any time that they can think, oh yes, well, I know I was told I can do that, and that helps me. Right?
So folks, you can practice it.
Practice it.
definitely.
Practice it. You can do it with someone for fun. Right? So other things that we can do, we'll finish with this in a minute, but other things that you can do, you spoke about crocheting, and I like that. And so as I'm talking about it, I'm thinking about it in different contexts. I'm thinking about the children. I'm thinking about the persons in Carriacou who probably them will be listening on. Is that we know they've lost their roots. We know that some of you, may not have, you may have lost a lot of things in your house. And these are things that we think, when we think of people, when you ask them, what can we send to Carriacou? It's not just the food and the clothes. It's activity, things that people can do. You understand? Activities that children. I have a friend right now who's putting together shoe boxes to send the kids in Carriacou with. I know she
Just activities
they can do.
So nice.
Right? What are some of the hobbies? So we've lost some of the hobbies. Let's say, for example, long ago, I know when it's moonlight, and I know Carriacou is getting safer in terms of walking along the road, right? In terms of before clearing up the streets. One of the things we loved to do long ago was walk moonlight night. These days we don't know when it's moonlight because all of us are in front of the TV. So it's like rediscovering what are some of the hobbies. You spoke about crocheting, maybe reading. What are some of the things that you can discover as hobbies that can help you to calm you, right? Right, exercise. All these are whichever way. It could be running on the spot, on the veranda. It doesn't have to be go to the gym.
Right.
Okay.
And
Social support, very important. Connect with someone.
Right.
Try to, even if it means you have to walk to their house down the road, you may not. If you don't have a situation, you can call them. Connect, social support, and laughter. We laughed a lot since we've been here.
Oh yes.
Laughter is one of the
Free.
And it's free. Right? So in front of us, for me to conclude on some of the things that I have here that we work with is the journaling, right? One of the ways in which, not just to calm and get what's out of your head, what is making you anxious, what are the things that you're thinking about on a daily basis. It could just be also a hobby and a habit where you write, this is how I'm feeling today.
Right.
And the good thing with journaling, the good thing about that is that you can look back and say, seriously, that's how I was feeling last year? But I've really come a long way because I'm really not feeling
That way
this
anymore.
way right now. So I normally, whenever I travel, like I buy a lot of journals. I usually give it to my kids when I work with them, and I said, just journal every day what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and we can talk about it next time. So I'm going to leave this with you.
Ooh,
because
thank you. And how did you know it's my favorite color?
Is it?
It is. It really is.
I
And
did
it is
promise
just really-
to send some back to Carriacou, and I did not get to do
we
it.
just
So
might be able to.
this one is for
very
you.
pretty.
You can
Thank
keep
you.
that one.
Thank you very much. I know we all wish you all had this one, but it's mine.
Journaling. Right. So we're talking about the other things that we do to help kids. We continue on talking about the sensory, the things that help you to relax and take you out of your head and relieve the stress and help kids to work through their stuff. One of this is squishy toys. Last year when I went to my play therapy conference, I won that one. Squishy toys, or you can feel it.
Those really
See the
soft.
sensory squishing things helps you it gets you out of your head and more in touch with your feelings, your bodily sensations, not your thoughts.
But in the classroom, this might not be something you would, because they might be so distracted.
In a classroom, in a regular classroom, but we're talking about when we're working with kids.
Just if you're working with them.
We're working with kids, all right? Or for parents, they can, you know, buy it, keep it there so the child can squeeze it. I have a niece who, since she was small, she's 30-something years now, she has a square of material and she keeps it in her pocket. She said she's going to be walking down the aisle with her square, and that's what relaxes her, the sensory feeling that piece of cloth. Yeah, so that's one of the things. The other thing I was telling you about, that with, now this is not a sand tray, but I just want you to feel what sand feels like, right? You might think about when you go to the beach, your toes and stuff, but the sensory, you know, of just feeling sand, you understand, is also calming and relaxing. And I have a child that loves to come, whenever he comes to me, the first thing he thinks, I want to play in the sand.
But I think sometimes we do it without even thinking, because even when we're on the beach, we tend to pass our fingers and our toes through the sand and just, without even realizing. And we don't realize. And then you would say, oh, I left the beach relaxed, not even realizing that all of these little activities that you were doing for free,
it was relaxing. It was not just the water and the sun, the sand. And then we have this is called thinking putty. It's also a sensory. Children could do. It's kind of like Play-Doh. Children can do, but just tell me how you feel when you squish that. You know, you get different sensory feelings from it. It's not just the sensory, but it's a smell. That also is calming and relaxing. Sense, right? Sense, but also the feeling.
How do you call it?
This one is called thinking putty, but it's like Play-Doh. So a lot of these things,
shape and
a lot of these things you can actually get on Amazon. Some therapists also work with taste. So they will have little packets of things like sour things, especially sour things, are said to be very therapeutic.
Interesting.
Right? So some therapists work with sour packets of things, and until you taste it, they will pass it around. Like, you know, like Andrews. When I was in school, I used to bring Andrews back to class for my friends, and we used to pass it around in the class and suck Andrews. It was therapy that we were doing, and we didn't really.
Interesting.
Okay, the final two things. For kids, that is also very therapeutic. We think about it as, oh, it's just blowing bubbles, but we don't realize it's actually, I'm not going to do it here, but you know how this works. It's relaxing, the blowing bubbles.
But I think that the adults maybe need to blow up bubbles, because I think that big adults usually tend to try to take the bubble from the children and go right ahead and blow it.
So it's fun, but they don't realize it's actually therapeutic.
Right.
It's like, because there are therapeutic exercises in conscious discipline where kids actually do those kind of things. It's like blowing out. And the final thing, which I usually order these, I got some in my play therapy conference last year, is that you can, for example, in the situation with a hope situation, or you can just ask someone to, you can give them 3 or 1, project your hope onto this. You give them pains. They will draw whatever they feel like drawing, or you could give them 3. How was it before? How is it now? And how is it in the future? And they just depict. And they can keep that, so that they can keep it in their room or wherever they choose to, and it just reminds them. So these are some of the things that we work.
And very simple everyday things.
Right, exactly. Things that you can get that's accessible. Now we know we don't want to sand mine, but I don't think you can sand mine with this.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is. I think this is all I think I have in terms of just what I put to the
definitely excellent. It has been, and of course you can just go back to the program if you need to remember some of the very practical, strategies tools that you can use for yourself as well as for those that you might have to work with. All right. So, Wendy, thank you very much for staying.
You're welcome.
An hour is gone.
Wow.
I know,
Can you imagine?
It's the fastest hour ever.
What does it say? When you're having fun, time goes fast. We were having fun.
We were. I know for sure that I will be using some of these strategies even with some of the programs that I do to teach some of the adults that I teach, because they're in turn going to deal with others. So I know for sure that that there will be opportunity for me to be able to share some of what I have learned here. So thank you so very much. listeners and viewers, thank you very much for staying with us. Any parting words?
Well, it was great being here. I thank you so much, Wendy, for inviting me. And my thought immediately goes to those persons in Carriacou who are still traumatized, whether it be adults, those who have still not had their roofs put back, those who were kids who are in situations where the kids might still be feeling stressed or displaced. That my prayer is that that the Lord provides immediate solutions for you in terms of getting your houses rebuilt, and that the kids get the interventions that they need so that they can be very functional, and we can return to normalcy by time school reopens in September.
Thank you so much again. Listeners, viewers, thank you very much for staying with us. See you next week, Friday, God's will, and have yourself a really safe and productive weekend. God bless you. Goodbye.
You are my strength, strength like no other, strength like no other, reaches to me.